I'm Alex Howard, and welcome to Conscious 2. And in today's interview, I'm joined by Mayuri Onerheim, and we're going to be exploring money as a spiritual practice. Now, this is part of a broader project. We've just filmed a 6-module course with Mayuri going into this in a lot more detail, so do check that out. But in this interview, we want to find out a little bit more about Mayuri's background and some of the key topics that we go into in much more detail in the course. So, hi Mayuri.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. And
Thank you. My pleasure.
I know you have a particularly interesting perspective on money and spirituality because you've had a background both as a chartered accountant
Yes.
and as an enthusiastic, let's say, spiritual student, but also teacher
Right.
of the Diamond Approach.
Yes.
So maybe as a starting point, what was the beginning of your spiritual path? What kind of initiated your journey?
Well, what initiated my journey was that I was living in northern Canada, which is not really a bastion of old soul or consciousness, actually. And I was really following what people normally do with their lives, which is to achieve success and monetary success in the outer world. And so I was in my early 30s and I was being offered a partnership in one of the big accounting firms at the time. And I had all the outer trappings you were supposed to have, car and house and in northern Alberta, fur coat. And realized, though, that I wasn't happy.
Right.
That I had all the things that everybody said you were supposed to have. But I wasn't happy, and I realized that there was something else that I needed to do.
And you were how old at that point?
I was 30.
Right.
Right.
Right. And I think it's interesting when people get to the point that they actually get the stuff that they think that they need
Right.
and check out what that feels like. Because often people spend their whole life trying to get there.
Right.
And it's a kind of interesting place. I mean, was it scary? Was it exciting? Like, how did it impact you?
Well, I just felt that I didn't belong somehow. That there was something wrong with life. But then I met a boyfriend who was deeply into the spiritual path, and that opened this whole new doorway for me. And
I think you mentioned when we were chatting over lunch the other day that he
Yes.
was like a lawyer, and it was
He
like
was a lawyer,
not the kind of
yes.
person you'd immediately expect to be on that
he
path.
was not. His whole family was, 10 kids in that family. They were all
right.
on the spiritual
Wow.
path. Right.
And so I believe you went and spent some time with Osho at this
Well,
point.
he did.
Right.
He did, and then came back and said, I want to go down there and I want you to come. And I said, well, this is a really big decision. I mean, I just got offered a partnership, just
Right.
a few days earlier.
Right, like the pinnacle. in a
The
sense.
pinnacle
Yeah.
of my career. And then I said, I need to think about it. And a few minutes later, he asked me, well, have you thought about it?
Don't you love men when they want an answer?
Yes. And so I said, okay. And so I'd been offered a partnership at the end of just before the Christmas break. And the first day of work back in January, I put my resignation on their desk.
Wow.
And so then I was off. I was off on the spiritual journey for several years
Wow.
and spent some time living in India in an ashram and
And
went deeply in the spiritual journey, yes.
Yes. And how was that contrast? Like going from kind of this, very corporate kind of, on the ladder, doing all the things that you're supposed to do, to just jumping off.
Well, it was interesting because in some ways I never felt satisfied by what life was presenting me. Nothing seemed intelligent enough. Nothing seemed challenging enough. It all seemed somewhat superficial or not as real as I wanted it, and suddenly life started to make sense. It's like, this is what we're really here to do.
Yeah.
We are really here to grow in our consciousness, and we get so hooked into believing that the story of our lives is the purpose of our lives, and not recognizing that, no, the purpose of the story of our lives is to help us increase in consciousness. So that we get closer and closer to who we truly are.
Right.
And so that's what it was like. It was like suddenly things were fulfilling instead of me questioning, like, what is this about?
And they were pretty radical times in many ways in terms of being in Osho's community and the kind of the energy that, as I understand it, that built up around that.
It was really interesting times because there weren't, now you can go on the internet or look around in your local neighborhood, and there's all kinds of spiritual groups or experiences to have, or people who are on the path who can show you something or teach you something. But then, we're talking like, 35 years ago, pretty much you had to go where the teachers were.
Right.
There was no internet. And so it meant leaving your life. If you were serious about this, it meant leaving your life. It doesn't mean leaving your life anymore.
Right. So you left your life for a
I
time.
left my life for a time.
And you went off on the path. And then I
I
know
did.
that then you came back to,
I did.
various reasons that, the community kind of things happened and you came back to your life.
Yes.
And as I understand it, you continued on your spiritual path, but you also came back to your work as an accountant.
Well, Osho died. And so I left India to come back here. This time I came to America. I got married, came to America, and I had to support myself.
Right.
And I ran into another spiritual path. So with Osho, it was like the states were incredible. But my question was, how do I get there from here? From where I am sitting right now, how do I get to that incredible state of being that he was in? And so I had to support myself. So, of course, I knew how to be an accountant. So that's what I did. I created a business. And then I started to be on this journey in the Diamond Approach School, which uses inquiry.
Right.
And inquiry starts where you are and inquires deeply into your direct experience. So it shows you exactly. So my question was answered with this path. How do I get there from here? By inquiring, by going into what's happening right now, going into my direct experience, and that starts unfolding deeper and deeper layers of myself. So there I was, being an accountant and studying on this path, and was happy with that for a time. And then, I started to be in the teacher training in that path.
And so it's kind of, and I know that, of course, you completed that training
Yes.
and now practice as a teacher.
I
in the
now
Diamond
practice
Approach.
as a teacher
Right.
of the Diamond Approach,
Right.
yes.
It kind of opens up some of the bits I want to explore in terms of the course and also the interview, that money and spirituality is so often seems to be a mess in people's
Right.
lives. It's
Yes.
like there seem to be people that go off and make a lot of money and then focus on their spiritual practice with this support and buffer behind them, but not really doing the two things at once. They've got the
Right.
money and now they're on the spiritual path.
Right.
Or you've got people that are on their spiritual path and often money is difficult and it becomes a shadow thing or something that is just too difficult to deal with. And
Right.
I wonder why that is. That it's so difficult to navigate this territory between money and spirituality.
Well, you've really pointed out the two extremes, really. There's people who are totally focused on the outer and they don't recognize that their lives are on a spiritual journey, so it's about money. And then there's the people who believe their lives is only about the spiritual journey and doesn't involve money. And that money is something that is basically not spiritual. But just I was saying that we have to start with where we are to get to our deepest core. Where we are includes working with money because we are dealing every day with money. Money is embedded in absolutely everything we do, from our homes to our cars, to our livelihood, to our dreams, to our vacations, to even our creativity, to everything. Money is part of it. So we can't separate ourselves and our journey from money. And so what I've recognized in that was, if that's true, then we need to look at our money issues. That will help us in two ways. It will help us get closer to ourselves because we have issues around money. We all do. And it will wake us up to those issues that we wouldn't even have recognized if it wasn't for money. So it works in two ways. It helps us get clearer about money, helps us get clearer about ourselves. And the other big thing is, I truly believe that the next movement of consciousness in the world is bringing our realization into our personal lives, into the world. So we need to bring our realization into the world. If money's embedded in everything that we do, we have to be conscious about money.
And surely the world needs more conscious people engaging on that level. Because otherwise, the only people engaging on that level are people that are not particularly conscious. And we know all the pains and sufferings of the planet that we see as a result of that.
Well, I think you're talking about even a higher level, a more macro level, global
Right,
level, which
right.
is that, we are driving a new money machine in the planet, a global machine that is not bound by countries, but has grown into a whole world economy that is being run by basically corporations because there hasn't been a political process. So a matching one to go with globalization. And so kind of contradictorily, it feels like we're left with ourselves.
Right.
And so we need to take back our power around money and look at our issues and see how can we be more conscious in our money decisions. And if we all were more conscious in our money decisions, we would be voting in a way with our money, and that would make a huge difference in the
Yeah,
world.
for sure, for sure. And one of
Yeah.
the pieces that I really enjoyed in the filming of the course was exploring this idea around enoughness.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to say a few words about that, because it when you really step back and think about it, it's kind of extraordinary that we have so much in
Yes.
terms of possessions and size of kind of personal space to
Yes.
whatever else, and yet we can so often feel it's not enough.
Yes. What that really points to is that the very nature of ego, the very nature of personality is that it is deficient because it is not our beingness. And when we are moving from personality, we always feel like there's scarcity, that there is some kind of something wrong with us, we don't have enough. And so we move to try and fill that, and we try and fill that with more money, with more stuff. And as long as there was enough ecology in the world, the growth money of model worked fine with that, hand in hand. But we've seen with climate change and the ending of ecology that that growth model doesn't work. So we have to reassess. And one of the ways to reassess is recognize we don't need to go from that deficiency, that scarcity that is at the bottom of all ego structures. We need to recognize that we are, in our deepest nature, being, that we are boundless, beautiful, joyful beings, and that the nature of the universe is benevolent. And that's what I'm trying to do in my money course is have us move from that scarcity model into a more abundance model and recognize that's who we are in our deeper nature. And if we start to recognize that that's who we are, we will quit falling into the trap of getting more and more stuff, of going into debt, of being part of the system that is endangering our planet even.
And of course, when we get to that experience, that we recognize that we're never going to feel the sense of not enoughness by getting more stuff.
Right.
But equally, I guess, going back to the macro for a moment, there's also a place of, from that perspective, what's the right action? Like, how do we
Right.
function in the world from that place?
Yes. So once you start feeling abundance and recognize you have enough, you're not going to be chasing what the culture is saying that you should chase. You won't be part of the lust economy
Right.
anymore. You'll be part of the enoughness economy and you will make wiser choices and you will live from a sense of abundance. And you will turn your consciousness inward and pick things that are about time and rest and connection and love and not about getting more stuff. So it could radically change how we are as human beings and contribute to a more sane economic system,
Right.
money system.
And of course, the potential on a macro level, as you say, is significant, but also on a personal level, the potential is significant. That it's like often what happens is when we just don't pay attention to something, when it's, we just kind of spend kind of unconsciously and people end up in debt and almost normalize to being in debt, like that's somehow just okay to just be in debt and have credit
Right.
cards and this and that. When we really get that together, I guess there's also a potential for a lot more support in our lives, because having to deal with a constant sense of actually there not being enough, like we're in debt or we're kind of not planning
Right.
for being more kind of old, not able to work so much, and
Yes.
that actually really taking care of money means that we're also taking care of ourselves.
what people don't recognize is how much time they spend in money. A third of our lives, outside of sleeping, is spent dealing with money. And if we're sitting in a place of deficiency, then we are always looking about how we're going to chase more and dealing with the issues and feeling the problems. And so we don't recognize how much of our lives is taken up dealing with that. So imagine if you could take all of that time and energy you put in around all the problems and deficiencies around money and started to feel like you have sufficient, but also that you have the tools, that you understand money, and you can start to be a support for you, it will totally change your life. Because instead of always looking where it feels deficient, you don't have enough, and you're scared, and you're trying to make it work, and instead of that, you're like, well, who am I? And what is unique about me? And what is my true purpose in life? And if money is a support for me instead of something I'm grappling with, then I will be able to bring that uniqueness into the world, who I truly am into the world. And that's the potential. So I think when people hear the word, we're going to look at money, all their resistances and all their issues and all this comes flooding in. And it's like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. But to me, I think money has become the issue that is going to wake people up.
Yeah.
It's become the issue in the world, I think, that and the environment, climate change.
They're so deeply linked as well.
And
right?
they are so deeply linked that if you bring consciousness to your money issues, to money, how you deal with money, it is going to contribute to freedom on the planet.
Beautiful.
And freedom for yourself both.
Right. So let's just finish by just saying a few words about the course. So
Okay.
it's broken down into 6 modules, and it's actually based upon an in-person workshop that I know that you offer as well.
Yes.
So that's also people can work with you in person in
Yes.
that way. But just say a few words about some of the kind of, we've touched on some obviously course here in the interview,
Right.
but just a few more words about some of the sections of the course.
Well, because it is about bringing your consciousness and your life into your money, that we look not just at consciousness, but how you deal with money. And most people don't learn about money in school. It's like, it's crazy. You learn about X, Y, and Z, but you don't learn about money.
Right.
And
You learn algebra you're never going to use,
algebra,
but you don't learn how to actually use your money. It's like, it's kind of crazy.
So I address both.
Right.
I address both the consciousness aspects and the practical aspects of money, so that when you're done the course, you actually can be transformed and starting down a different path of how to be with money in your life.
Yeah, and having kind of sat here kind of through the kind of filming of it, I think there's a great kind of power in it. And I think, as you say, it's not just the inner, there's also real practical pieces in terms of down to things like budgeting and investing and that side of things as well.
Yes. And so I really promise that if you do this course, it will change your relationship to money. You will be sitting in a different place when you're done. And you will be able to see the opportunity that you have to continue this journey, where it could lead you. You will get a glimpse about where it could lead you.
Beautiful. Mayuri, thank you so much, both for your time in the interview, but also for the wonderful teaching in the course.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you guys for watching, and we look forward to talking with you again here on Conscious 2 very soon. Bye-bye.